A Beautiful Mind is an American biographical drama film released in the year 2001. The plot of the film revolves around an asocial but extraordinary mathematical genius, John Nash, and his educational journey. Things become complicated for John when he accepts an assignment from William Parcher and begins to develop schizophrenia while watching the effects his condition brings on his wife and son. Set in September 1947, the movie opens with a scholar giving a mathematics lecture at Princeton University. After the introductory class, the graduates meet each other. John Nash, a mysterious West Virginia genius, got admission to the university based on the Carnegie Scholarship for Mathematics. He meets fellow math and science graduate students Nielsen, Bender, and Saul. Just then, the co-recipient of the Carnegie Scholarship for Mathematics named Martin Hansen arrives and disrespects John by calling him a waiter based on his appearance. John doesn't take the disrespect politely and in return insults Martin by telling him that both his research studies did not have any kind of innovative idea. Eventually, both of them become rivals. John then arrives in his hostel room and starts setting it up. His roommate Charles Herman, a literature student, arrives, and John is surprised to see his eccentric activities. At first, John tries to ignore Charles, but upon Charles' insistence to break the ice between them, both the roommates drink together. Drunk, John reveals to Charles that the most important goal of his life is to publish his own idea to create an identity for himself. Later, on the university premises, Martin challenges John to a game during which he presses John's nerve by questioning whether or not he will ever be able to publish an idea of his own. John gets affected by Martin's words and loses the game. Later, he tells Charles that Martin has started writing a paper of his own, unlike him, who hasn't even thought of a topic to write on. Charles explains to John that in competitive behavior, someone always loses. He advises him not to exhaust himself and takes him out to a bar to relax. In the bar, Nielsen points John to a girl who finds John attractive. John approaches the girl and bluntly talks with her about sex, which ends up with him getting slapped in front of everyone. The following day, a professor informs John that his lack of progress is upsetting and might result in his failure. Dejected, John returns to his room and busts his head onto the window glass. Charles tries to calm him down, but John begins to fight him. This infuriates Charles, and to vent his frustration, he pushes John's study table out of the window. As the table crashes into pieces, both the boys laugh their hearts out. In the evening, while sitting in a bar, John gets an epiphany when he hears his classmates discussing how to approach a group of women at a bar. Martin mentions a quote from the professor of modern economics, Adam Smith, "Every man for himself." This inspires John, and he suggests that a group approach would lead to better chances of success in developing a new concept of governing dynamics. Ecstatic, he returns to his room and starts working on his new theory. Soon enough, he writes a breakthrough article on his idea and receives outstanding remarks from his professor. As a result, he gets a placement at Wheeler Defense Labs on MIT campus, for which he chooses Bender and Saul as his lab partners. When Martin finds out about it, he feels excluded but celebrates with John regardless. 5 years later, in 1953, John is invited to the Pentagon to study the intercepted radio transmissions from Moscow. John looks at the encrypted telecommunications and deciphers them mentally within a few minutes. The Army generals are highly impressed by his abilities, and he is escorted back to MIT. However, before leaving, he finds a mysterious man gazing at him from a corner. Upon returning to MIT, John gets bored with his regular duties, such as teaching, and as a result, he keeps trying to evade them. While giving a lecture in one of his classes, he finds a girl quite attractive, and the two share flirtatious gazes with each other. At night, while leaving the campus, John is approached by the mysterious William Parcher of the United States Department of Defense. William appreciates John for his impressive work at the Pentagon. He then asks John why he has no family and friends. John explains to him that he is a lone wolf and does not like socializing. William tells him that it is a good thing, as in certain endeavors, his lack of personal connection would be considered an advantage. At first, John is confused, but when William takes him to the Department of Defense headquarters, John is surprised to see a whole new world there. Before assigning him the task, William mentions that the assignment will increase John's security clearance to top secret, and that disclosure of secure information can result in imprisonment. He then gives John a classified task to look for hidden patterns in magazines and newspapers to spoil a Soviet plot. Before starting, John is medically tested, and a radium diode is implanted in his body which shows him the access codes to his drop spot. Eventually, John becomes indulged in his search for the patterns, due to which he starts missing classes at MIT. One day, his student Alicia Lard approaches him in the office to remind him about the class he missed. She then asks John to dinner. John agrees but takes her to a formal gathering as his date, and the two eventually fall in love. During the event, he notices someone spying on him. Soon enough, John becomes obsessed with deciphering patterns from magazines and newspapers and delivering his results to a secret mailbox. One night, he observes a car following him and he flees. Later, while spending time with Alicia at a park, she asks him why he doesn't talk much. John tells her that he does not know how to flirt with women and is rather direct with them about his needs. Unlike other girls, Alicia kisses him immediately, leaving John surprised. Later, on a return visit to Princeton University, John meets Charles and his niece Marcy. The two friends chat for a bit, during which John tells Charles about Alicia. Seeing John's excitement for her, Charles encourages him to marry Alicia. Upon returning to MIT, John proposes to Alicia on her birthday, and the lovebirds soon get married. 1 year later, John is seen delivering his results in Cambridge, Massachusetts. All of a sudden, William arrives and takes him in the car. The Soviet agents pursue them, and a shootout follows between William and the Soviet agents. Dazed, John returns home to Alicia, but does not tell her anything. He becomes suspicious and keeps looking out for his life. One day, William approaches him and John informs him that he is quitting as Alicia is pregnant, and he wants to ensure his and his family's safety. William threatens him that if he quits working, he will let the Russians know that John worked against them. Compelled, John keeps working and decides to send Alicia away to her sisters. Alicia becomes worried seeing John's odd behavior, but remains clueless about the cause. Later, while delivering a guest lecture at the National Mathematics Conference at Harvard University, John notices a few people and suspects them to be Soviet agents. He flees the conference, but the agents, led by psychiatrist Dr. Rosen, manage to catch him and forcibly sedate him. Although John asks Charles for help, Charles keeps staring at him while holding Marcy in his arms. Soon, John wakes up at a psychiatric hospital next to Dr. Rosen. When Rosen asks him to talk about his work life, John refuses, saying it is classified work. He then sees Charles sitting in a corner and starts asking him for help. Rosen tells him that there is no Charles and that he is hallucinating. John is committed to the facility against his will, and he keeps asking everyone for help. Dr. Rosen tells Alicia that her husband has paranoid schizophrenia and has lost grip on reality. Moreover, he informs her that Charles, Marcy, and William exist only in John's imagination. Alicia does not believe the doctor, but when he tells her that he found out from Princeton that John lived alone in the housing facility and had no roommate, Alicia is shocked. To confirm Dr. Rosen's findings, she raids John's office and is surprised to see it filled with magazine cutouts. She then goes to the dropout where John delivered his work and empties the mailbox. Returning to the psychiatric facility, she tells John that no William Parcher is in the Defense Department and shows him the unopened documents he delivered to the secret mailbox. John's chest tightens upon hearing Alicia, and he runs away from her, trying to find the implant in his wrist. After much consideration, Dr. Rosen suggests giving John a course of insulin shock therapy, 5 times a week for 10 weeks. After the course, John is released from the facility, and 1 year later, he is seen living with Alicia and their son. Alicia regularly keeps giving John his antipsychotic medication to keep him from relapsing. However, John feels frustrated as the side effects from the medication keep him from focusing on work. Alicia also gets frustrated due to John's lack of interest in her. Soon, John secretly stops taking his medication and starts seeing William again. William takes him to a shed near his house, asking him to resume work and assuring him that he is real. In 1956, Alicia finds out that John has secretly started working on the classified assignment in the shed. Devastated, she rushes to the house only to find that John has left their baby in the running bathtub, believing Charles was watching the baby. Compelled, Alicia tries calling Dr. Rosen, but John pushes her and the baby after the imaginary William provoked him to stop her from making the call. Scared, Alicia tries to run away with the baby, but John stops her car. John then realizes that Marcy can't be real since she hasn't aged a bit since they met. So he finally accepts that William and Charles are also merely hallucinations. Dr. Rosen arrives and suggests giving John another course of insulin shock therapy. However, John refuses and chooses to deal with his symptoms himself. Although John insists Alicia leave him, she decides to stay and support him in his recovery. 2 months later, John returns to Princeton University, where he finds out that Martin is now head of the mathematics department. He asks him to give him a place to work at the university, as it could prove to be beneficial in his recovery. However, soon Martin finds John fighting his hallucinations, with everyone looking at him as if he is a madman. Upon Alicia's encouragement, John finally says goodbye to Charles and Marcy and starts working in the university, auditing classes. Time goes by and John learns to ignore his hallucinations. He makes his place in the societal community and starts living a normal life. In 1978, one day in the library, a student sees John solving a complicated math problem. Inspired, he requests John teach him and his friends a couple of solutions. Surprised to see his abilities, Martin calls Alicia to the university to show her the changed John. Later, John requests Martin to let him resume teaching again. Martin hesitates at first, fearing that the students might daunt John and affect his mental health, but soon agrees to let him teach again. In 1994, a man named Thomas King approaches John to inform him that he is being considered for the Nobel Prize. John is stunned to hear Thomas' words and apologizes for his silence. Thomas explains to him that over the past years, his equilibrium has become a cornerstone of modern economics. He then takes him to the professor's lounge, where John's fellow professors honor him by giving him their pens. John is touched by the gesture, and soon he is awarded the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences in Sweden for his revolutionary work on game theory. While giving a thank you speech, John owes his success to Alicia and announces that she is the reason he is who he is today. Alicia gives him a round of applause as tears of happiness roll down her cheeks. After receiving the award, John, Alicia, and their son leave the auditorium while John ignores William, Charles, and Marcy, watching him from a corner. The film ends with an epilogue explaining that John's theories influenced global trade negotiations, national labor relations, and even breakthroughs in evolutionary biology. This movie has a rating of 8.2 on IMDb. The budget of this movie was around $58 million, and at the box office, it earned $316.8 million. I hope you all like this video. If yes, then make sure to like, comment, and most importantly subscribe to the channel for more movie recaps.